Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Old man's gonna ramble a bit. Um, just thoughts that crossed my mind. Through my daughters, I've been introduced to a lot of queer people. Um, when I say queer, I'm talking about LGBTQ, that whole thing. I'm gonna say queer because it's easier than trying to fumble out LGBTQIA plus minus hashtag supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. No, it's just whatever. It's a mouthful. Queer is shorter. Give me a break on this. uh, it's my channel. Anyway, through my children, I have met a lot of queer people. This actually is nothing new for me, despite the fact that I grew up in a small town of 5,000 people. In middle school and high school, I was involved in theater and in chorus. Moving to the big city, I worked in a lot of restaurants. My first decade of work was in restaurants, and there's a lot of queer people waiting tables and tending bar and things like that. So, you know, I admit to not always having been the best ally of the queer community. Not proud of it, but it was the 80s. And, you know, the culture is what it is. I was never hostile. I never was rude or mean or abusive to anyone. But it weirded me out. I didn't understand how a man could be attracted to other man. That made no sense to me at all, and I was very very uncomfortable with it. But at the same time, my thought was that whatever, it doesn't harm me at all. What these people do in their own lives is none of my business. Me being weirded out by it is my own problem. I just try to treat them like a person, like an ordinary person. I treat them like everybody else. Everyone deserves a certain amount of respect. Whether I'm weirded out about it or not, whether I'm uncomfortable with it or not, it's none of my business. And they should be treated like everybody else. And I tried hard to do that. Sometimes more successful than others, I guess. I still made the same crass jokes that other people made. I still laughed at the comedians who said those things that nowadays I realize are kind of hateful and harmful. So, those are the things I'm most embarrassed about, that I laughed at those things or said those things. Like I said, I was never mean to anyone, but I still would use gay as an insult, or not to a gay person, but those types of things. The types of things that young men in their teens and 20s say it in the 1980s, and for all of human history, as far as I know, or at least all of American history, and much of European history. But we're not talking history. I'm rambling. Anywho, on to my children's generation. And people are more accepting, but there's still things that I'm having to get used to. Now there's the non-binary and the trans community. And again, it's not something I can wrap my head around. It doesn't make sense to me to be non-binary, because I don't think and feel that way, but that doesn't mean it's not how they feel. I'm not trying to belittle them. It's just something I have a hard time wrapping my head around. And my parents' generation is worse. They really can't wrap their head around it. I can say, okay, I can live with it, and not, I can sort of, okay, that's who they are, fine. But like the older, my parents' generation, my wife's parents' generation, they're just, man, just not getting it. But I try. But the non-binary thing, I mean, trans people being one name that I've known them for years as my children's friends, and then becoming trans and having a new name, or becoming non-binary and changing their name. That, I mean, the name changing thing is like, I don't want to. I know this is how they are. There's a name they've chosen, and as someone who calls himself Tuna, that I understand. You know, I understand wanting to be called what you want to be called. That your identity is this name is part of your identity. But I still mess up so much because I knew them by the other name, for so long, and I still make mistakes. And the non-binary thing, using they as a gender neutral gender neutral pronoun. I actually have a harder time with that because my brain's not hardwired that way. My brain is hardwired into the gender binary. My brain thinks male, female, he, she. That's just such a hardwired part of my subconscious that I don't know if I'm ever going to make the switch. I don't know if I can. That doesn't mean I always say he or she, but I do slip up a lot. I really do. My wife and I both, we try and say they as much as possible, but we have to kind of force ourselves to. I don't know if it will ever become automatic because we didn't use that for 50 years or more. For 50 years or more, we always used he or she. I know people say that, well, people have always used they as a gender neutral term, and we have, but usually when we were unsure of the gender, or referring to multiple people with that might have multiple genders in there, it's a mental pathway, when someone it's easier with someone who presents as androgynous. My daughter had a friend who was in band in high school, who said they were non-binary, and I actually found it easier to refer to that person as them because they didn't present as either male or female. They dressed very androgynously. They had a very androgynous look to them. But people who are feminine presenting, who look feminine to me, my brain goes she and her, and I can't stop my brain from doing that no matter. And it's been years, so I mean, I try, and I fail, and they know I'm trying, and so they're forgiving of me, which I am very grateful for. But I think that this whole thing is about hoping that people understand that a lot of us out there are trying to be respectful. Just that it's hard for us because we spent so long, and it's just not part of our brain's makeup to really, really get it. Change is hard, and the older you get, the harder it gets. Believe me. You might, I see people say, oh, it's just that generation, which is kind of true, but I wasn't raised in a traditional family home. I was raised by wild pot smoking hippies. So the only like hard cultural stuff I have is what I absorbed from my so-called peers and the media around me that I had no control over. My parents didn't raise me to be judgmental, or my parents were very open or tried to be very open and understanding and tried to teach me that. But as I get older, it's harder to learn new things. It's harder to change. And the older we get, the harder it is to learn new things, and the harder it is to change. Like I said, my father, my parents, my wife's parents, they're never going to adjust properly. My father-in-law still calls people by other names, and he's never going to stop. But he's almost 93. He can't make the transition. No matter how respectful he's a very respectable man, but his brain can't make the adjustment. He misgenders our cat and my daughter's dogs. My daughter's dogs are both girls. He constantly refers to them as male. Our cat is male. He constantly refers to Momo as her. Both my in-laws do that. They just can't. To them, dogs are male, cats are. You just give up after a while. It's like, okay, mom, okay, dad, whatever. You just, after a while, you just stop. They're just set in their ways. And I guess I'm just asking for patience for people like me, people like us. I understand that there are people out there who refuse to change, who are very rude and insulting and condescending and ignorant. Those people you should give as much crap to as possible. Hit them upside the head with a brick. Maybe not literally, maybe literally. I just use your best judgment, whether the brick is knitted or not, whether it should be figurative or not. Use your best judgment. But just asking for patience, and know that I'm trying to be better and trying to be respectful. That's it. Good hunting.